Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back once again to another Fallout 4 settlement build. Today we're going to be back in our boxcar town, checking out the bank. Now I gotta be honest, this build was one that took a little convincing for me to do, but I'll explain how it works out a little bit later on. That being said, hopefully you guys enjoy the build, and without further ado, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Alright guys, so like I mentioned, the bank is inside of our boxcar town, and to be a little more specific, it's actually right underneath the mayor's office inside of our town hall. So at this point, this building's almost entirely done aside from the second floor, but once we get that all filled in, the town should be ready for a full walkthrough, which should be pretty cool, so hopefully we can get that done pretty soon. But yeah, this here is the bank. And just like most of the other builds in this town, it is a little bit on the smaller side. But really quick, in case some of you haven't seen the mayor's office, I'll run upstairs really quick and show that to you. So to get all the way up there, you'll need to take the elevator. And just like I said during the mayor's office video, he is a rather corrupt guy. So I tried to make his boxcar area a little more luxurious. But if you want to see a more in-depth walkthrough of this area, feel free to check that video out, but as for now, we'll go ahead and travel back down to the bank. Alright, so really quick, I'll try and explain why a bank works in a Fallout settlement, because I was also a little skeptical about this idea, especially when it came to the caps. But for this to work, the caps are really not the main focus of the bank. In fact, they're a rather low focus, and the bank is more so designated for traders, just because if you think about it, when the traders come into town and set up shop, they're not always going to have enough room to store all their goods, and I think that's where the bank comes in. And in this case, I suppose we might as well start by the door and then just kind of work our way around. So starting off, you'll see we've got just a little bit of a seating area, nothing too crazy. And then just some other small decorations to spice this area up. There's also some nice atmospheric lighting given to us by not only the candles, but also the radio. I find that always tends to work out quite well. And then other than those, there's also some decorations on the wall, whether that be just an old poster or the flag to the right. Now, as for this area to the left, this is kind of the same problem we had with our Brotherhood of Steel outpost, where it's just a bunch of rubble and crap. I mean, there's not really too much you can do with an area like this, so I figured it would be not only more reasonable, but also maybe even a bit more realistic to just leave it how it is. And just so it doesn't draw too much attention, notice I have left it dark so that the player's eye is more drawn to some of the more lit up areas. Moving on to the far side of the bank, you'll see we have yet another seating area. And the main reason we have so many of these is because sometimes when you go to the bank, it usually takes quite a while to get all your affairs in order, so I just imagined that a lot of people would be waiting in here, so I tried to make that a comfortable experience for them. And with that being the case, there's not only comfortable seats, but also some things for them to do while they wait, such as play a game of checkers, or maybe even just read a book. And now moving on to, I guess, one of the final parts of the build. This is where the teller would be, over here at the counter. And once again, there are a few more seats, just in case their deal or conversation does linger on a little longer than they might want it to. And back here you'll see we've got tons of storage, just to go along with the whole theme that this is more designated for traders who just want to store all their goods. So there's quite a bit of that. There's also a few caps, since that still is a slight focus of this build. And also in terms of other decorations, there's a few files, since I think those would be quite necessary to keep everything in order. And speaking of keeping order, there's also a shotgun beneath the counter, just in case anyone gets a little bit too rowdy. Or say for if someone tried to even rob the bank. Along the backside, once again, just a bit more storage. You can see we have a large assortment of that type of stuff, whether that be lockers, suitcases, trunks, or even a more heavy-duty safe. And speaking of safes, there's also quite a few more of those inside the wall. A few more junky type of decorations. And then I guess the one thing I wasn't too fond of when it came to this build was the workshop thing. Unfortunately, that's kind of stuck there. I don't think there's any way you can remove that thing, so I was kind of forced to work around it when it came to this part of the build. Oh, and also, for those wondering, all these pictures along the wall, these were all here to begin with. So that's why some of them are crooked, which I think is pretty cool. And for those who want to, you can remove them, but I just thought they were rather fitting for a build like the bank. And now, last but not least, we do have an assortment of items next to the front door, such as the umbrella holder, just in case some wastelanders are just coming out of the rain. There's also some more seats. And by the way, these barrels, I usually try and use these as something that gives the different areas a bit more privacy and also kind of separates them. So for instance, in terms of separation, it would kind of split off the main area from this side to the right with all the filing cabinets. And if you want to just push this effect even more, you could add more barrels or even other sorts of crates if you wanted to. But the reason for all the filing cabinets are once again just to store files and other sorts of paperwork, which once again just goes in line with keeping everything in order. And there's also a few more, once again, junky items that maybe a general goods trader might decide to store here. But anyways guys, I'd say that'll just about wrap things up for today, so let me know what you thought of the build down in the comments. I will admit it was one of my least favorite ones we've done so far, but that being said, I think it was still pretty necessary for this town. And I think when it comes to our new raider settlement that we're working on, we might be able to do some kind of variation of a bank that more so rips people off. So maybe that would be a more interesting spin-off on this type of build. But really quick, I did mention earlier that we still need to fill in the second floor of this build, just to get things all finished up. So if you guys have any ideas for anything we could put up here, feel free to let me know. But other than that, thanks again for watching guys. Like I said, hopefully you did enjoy the build. And as always, I will see you in the next one.